Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Future of Work with Jacob Morgan. Today, I am joined by Shellye Archambeau, and she has a very long list of accomplishments, but I will just briefly say that she is a board director of Verizon Nordstrom, former CEO of MetricStream, author of this brand new book that I'm holding here. So I'm going to hold it up to the camera. Look at that color. I love it. Unapologetically Ambitious. Take risks, break barriers, and create success on your own terms. Shellye, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Jacob. This is going to be fun. I've been looking forward to it.
My wife saw this book sitting on my desk, and she's like, "What is that? That sounds like something I need to read." And I said, "Funny you should ask. I'm going to be speaking with her." So before we jump into the book, because there's a lot of really great insights from here, why don't we just start with a little bit of background information about you? So take us way back. You probably don't know this, but we both grew up in Granada Hills, which I learned from reading your book.
Okay.
So I want to go to way back, how you grew up, how you were raised. I mean, what was your life like? How did you eventually get to become the CEO of MetricStream, board director of so many amazing companies, and such a well-known and respected leader today?
Oh, goodness. So going way back, I am the eldest of four. My parents were crazy. They had 4 children in less than 5 years. Can you even imagine that, Jacob? I mean, so I know. And we moved around a lot growing up. So here I am, the Granada Hills story. Here I am, we're living in Philadelphia. I'm in 1st grade. And we literally move over Christmas to Granada Hills. Dad has a new job in LA. And that's where we end up. Well, Granada Hills was very different from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And this is the 60s. I'm a little older than you. This is the 60s. So in the 60s, you had all the racial issues going on, lots of fight for civil rights. And for as many people that were pro, you just as many that were con. And here I am. And I'm the only Black girl in my class. Matter of fact, in the grade, and it might have been the school. That's how homogenous it was back then. Pardon me. And what happened was all of the things that were happening out there in society all showed up in school. Mm-hmm. So people made it very clear that they didn't really want me there. Walking to school every day, people would drive by and call me terrible things. Now listen, imagine that. These are adults. I am 6, 7 years old, right? I mean, this is ridiculous.
Nuts.
It was just horrible. Kids would do things to me. I got beat up. It was not good. So all of that, my parents, especially my mom, you come home and every day was like, Mom, it's not fair, right? This has happened to me, or that's happened, or I didn't get something I deserved. And Mom would always say, Shellye, you're right. It's not fair. Life isn't fair. What? The good is supposed to be fair, right? I mean, if you get a piece of pie, I want one that's the same size. If you get this and I get that, right, it should be fair. What do you mean it's not fair? So I was raised very early to know that life isn't fair. And so what are you going to do about it? And literally, coming through, what it did is it made me very intentional about what I do to try to improve my odds. Because I knew if I just did what everybody else did, I probably wasn't going to get much. Yeah. So fast forward, I'm now in high school and I'm having that obligatory conversation with the high school guidance counselor, which is are you going to college, right, et cetera? Yes, I'm going to college. What do you want to do after college? I don't know. I just want to make enough money where my thermostat can be 72 degrees in the wintertime because it never went above 68. It could be below 68, but not above 68. It was freezing. I'm like, how much money do I have to earn to keep the thermostat at 72? So anyway, she said, well, what do you like to do? And I said, clubs, organizations. I mean, all these things, whatever. She goes, well, Shellye, clubs and business are very similar. And I said, done. I like to run clubs, so I'm going to run a business. So literally at 16, I set a goal to become a CEO because that's what the people were called that ran businesses.
You set that goal at 16 years old. You set that goal.
16. So now, did I know what that meant, Jacob? No, I had no idea what that really meant. But I picked it. So now that it was a goal, I spent my time being very intentional. Well, how do I make this happen? Right? Yeah. Because I've got to improve my odds. So I went to Wharton because Wharton was the top business school. I said, all right, I need to get the credential. Went to Wharton. And then coming out of Wharton, I joined IBM because I wanted to be in tech since that was a growing industry, more opportunity. And IBM at the time was kind of the leader of the technology industry. So I said, great, I'll join IBM and become CEO of IBM. So that's how it started.
Just like that, CEO of IBM.
Just like that, right, exactly. And then I get there and I'm like, oh my God, there's got to be 120,000 people in this company. And they probably all want to be CEO. All right, how am I going to stand out? What am I? So anyway, literally, that's how I approached everything. And honestly, after 14 years, I actually did very well. I was the youngest Black person named to be executive. I was the first Black female to be sent overseas on an assignment. I'm now running a multi-billion-dollar division of Asia Pacific. And my boss reports to Lou Gerstner, the CEO. So there's no one above me that looks like me. I mean, I'd done well in 14 years.
Yeah.
But it wasn't clear that I was really going to have the opportunity to compete for the CEO role. And that was my goal. So I made the hard decision that said, okay, I got to leave and find a different path to become a CEO. And I worked my way to Silicon Valley after a brief stint in Dallas, Texas as president of Blockbuster.com back in the 90s when they were actually a behemoth.
I remember, did you work with, was it Nigel Travis?
Yes, Nigel ran all the stores.
Yeah, Nigel was a guest on this podcast as well, way back when. So yeah, small world.
Indeed. And then I get to Silicon Valley. I became the chief marketing officer and EVP of sales for a couple of newly public companies, NorthPoint and then LoudCloud, which was the Ben Horowitz, Mark Andreessen precursor to Opsware. And then got hired by Kleiner Perkins to be CEO of a very broken company called Zaplet that we turned into MetricStream. And over the course of 14 years, really built it into a global market leader for governance, risk, and compliance.
Wow. So it all started with 16-year-old Shellye.
It did.
I can't remember what I was doing at 16 years old. I think I was playing StarCraft, which was a computer game. And my grade point average was like a 2.7. Yeah, I was not a happy high schooler. So I can only imagine, I can't imagine at that age knowing like what I wanted to do. Well, it's fascinating. And then so basically you had that goal and you worked for it you're pretty much your whole life.
You know what? Yes. The answer is yes. And like I tell people, it wasn't that I knew exactly what I was signing up for. I just picked a goal. And then I went after it. The good news is, as I was rising through, I'm like, okay, I like this. I do like leadership, right? I do like, so fortunately that all worked for me.
Yeah. And so I guess we can talk about your book now, because I love the way that you organized it. And you had these great sections in here, which are early lessons, strategize for success, living the plan, swerve, and improving the odds. And so what I wanted to do is maybe go through each one of those sections and pick out maybe one or two things. I have things that I'm personally interested in, but if you have a part of that section that you think people would benefit most from, then we can talk about that. For early lessons, I loved the first one. There were three sections that really stood out to me. One was create your own luck, one was set your goals, and one was imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. So create your own luck, I definitely want to go over, because I think that's a very important concept for people to just understand, that they have more accountability and control than they realize. So what does create your own luck actually mean, and how could that apply, you think, for a lot of people today who want to be in leadership roles?
So creating your own luck to me is positioning yourself so that when opportunity shows up, comes around, happens, you actually have the ability to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So it's having, yes, the right skills, yes, the right experience, but I'll also tell you, it's having the right attitude is a big piece of it as well. So that you're open, right, to the opportunity when it comes. And I've always believed that planning can also improve your odds to be lucky, for luck to happen. It's interesting when, an example would be when going to Wharton. All right. So I decide that, all right, I want to be in business, so I need to go to Wharton, and I want to go to Wharton undergrad, which was very hard to get into, but I thought I could save myself from having to go to grad school, right, if I went to Wharton undergrad. Well, you could say I was lucky that I got in. Except even before I knew what I wanted to do, I was getting good grades because I knew I needed options, right? So yes, I was lucky, but frankly, I actually helped myself being lucky by making sure that I got good grades, was very involved in school, in the organizations, right? All those different things. You know, everything that happens when I set a plan, I try to assume it's going to happen and then do things to get ready for it. So when it does happen, I'm lucky that I can take advantage of it.
I think it was the CEO of Honeywell who I was interviewing on this podcast, and he was telling me that there's basically no substitute for hard work, or maybe it was at Home Depot. Somebody was sharing a story of how, they went through several jobs where they were not happy. They had leaders who didn't treat them well, but they consistently focused on their performance and they consistently did really well. Because it's very easy if you're in an environment where you don't think people support you to slack off and then you never get promoted.
Exactly.
And he was telling me this story of, even though the environment wasn't great, he consistently worked hard, and then an opportunity opened up and they said, well, who's going to be a good fit for this opportunity? And they said, oh, so-and-so is working really hard. They're really great at this. That person should be promoted. So it very much reminds me of that idea of, just kind of waiting for the right moment. It's like what you see in all those movies, right? Like, wait for the right moment and then we strike. And it's just planning that whole time, because you will get that opportunity.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, an example at IBM was when I got to IBM and I'm thinking everybody wants to be CEO, right? How am I going to differentiate myself? So I looked at what IBM did poorly, right? What was IBM not good at? And frankly, it was marketing. They didn't even have a chief marketing officer. They called sales reps marketing reps, right? I mean, they didn't know what marketing was. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to major in marketing. And every staff opportunity, every project was marketing oriented. I did. Well, Lou Gerstner comes to IBM and says, there's no marketing. First job he hires, a chief marketing officer, Abby Comstam. She looks around and says, who are the people that know marketing? My first executive job was a marketing job.
Yeah, no, I love that, because a lot of people, so I'm trying to think what the specific action could be for people who are listening or watching. I suppose it's to just be aware of what's going on around you and consistently making sure that you're working on yourself and doing good quality work so that when the opportunity comes up, you can kind of pounce on it.
Oh, wait, but I want to add one more, because that almost sounds like work hard and good things will happen.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that's the case at all. All right. I mean, work hard, put your head down, and you're going to miss out on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it's important that you make sure you let people know what you're actually doing and what you do, and that sounds so basic. What do you mean? Well, I'll give you a simple example. In our culture, right? Common way to meet people, break the ice, is you say, oh, what do you do? Right? What do you do? And somebody will say, oh, I'm vice president of operations for so-and-so. Do you know what they do, Jacob?
No.
No, we answer with titles. As much as we fight for titles, titles are meaningless. Okay, they're meaningless because a title has completely different responsibilities, company to company, heck, even within the same company, right? Department to department. So take the time to tell people what you do. What do you do? Oh, I'm vice president of operations. I'm responsible for all the strategic accounts for the Western region for blah, 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 blah. 20 seconds. Tell them what you do. Because then when they're talking to somebody later on and somebody says, I'm looking for somebody who knows how to work with strategic accounts and blah, 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 they're going to think of you. If you just said you're head of operations, you're not in their mind.
Yeah. Oh, no, I love that. That's great advice. The next thing that I wanted to go over, well, there was two other ones that I really liked. Set your goals and imposter syndrome. So maybe we could start off with set your goals. You talked about 16 years old, you set that goal for yourself. Probably a lot of people at 16 didn't know what they wanted to do. But can you talk about the importance of setting your goals, and maybe for a lot of people who are adults, how can they go about doing that in the right way?
Sure. So setting a goal is really just setting an objective for yourself that's out in the future, right? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to create, right? Whatever the right verb is there. And the reason that's important is if you don't have something that you're actually trying to do, no direction in which you're trying to head, then frankly, it almost doesn't matter what you go do next.
Yeah.
People come to me often to get advice. Oh, what should I do next? Here's what I've done, blah, blah. And my first question is always the same. Well, what do you want to do? What's your goal? And if the answer is, I don't know, then I have a really harsh response, which is, then it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't. Now, sometimes they'll tell me, oh, I want to do blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, great. Who else knows? Nobody? Maybe their spouse?
Yeah, if nobody else knows.
Right. That doesn't work either. You know, you have to let people know what you want. Otherwise, they can't help you. And it's been my experience that people will help you if they know what you want, if they can. So let people help you. So setting goals is really all about picking that objective in the future. And honestly, if you can only think 2 years ahead, then that's better than nothing, right? I don't care how far ahead, however far ahead you can think. Pick that goal. Ask yourself what has to be true for you to achieve that goal. And then ask yourself, how do you make that true? Which is basically the plan. What has to be true? And then how do I make it true? That's how I think about everything. And that's how to make the plan.
What do you do if you don't meet your goals, or you fail?
You just reassess and you look at changing your plan. I don't change the goal. I mean, I told you really early on, right? My goal was to be CEO of IBM. Well, you didn't announce that I was CEO of IBM because I wasn't. So you failed at that. I kept the goal though, which was to become a CEO. I just changed the plan. And that's why there's a whole section called Swerve, right? Which we'll talk about. But don't give up on your goals because things get hard or you hit a stumbling block, right? Or trust me, obstacles, issues, problems, unexpected situations, 2020, right? All these things will happen. That's okay. Just figure out a different path, a different plan, but don't give up on your goal.
The other thing that I think is really important, and you called it, obviously what it is imposter syndrome. So have you dealt with imposter syndrome? I mean, can you share a story maybe of when you were an executive at any of the organizations you were a part of? Did you experience imposter syndrome, and what did that look like, and how did you battle it or conquer it?
Listen, I have been suffering from imposter syndrome my entire life. Okay, my entire life. So I can't tell you how to conquer it because I still do from time to time, which is ridiculous, right? Look at the things I've done. It's crazy, but I do. But what I can tell you is how to deal with it, how to make sure it doesn't stop you. Okay. So, I mean, when have I experienced it? Man, just about every major step. It's like, okay, you get the new job. You're now responsible for global XYZ. And you're thinking, I don't know enough to be able to do this. Wait till I figure out that I don't have all the skills that they expect, right? Do I really? It's that imposter syndrome is that voice in your head that is basically highlighting all the doubts you have about yourself, right? Except it's blaring, right? What makes you think you can do this? You can't do this. And then you get, oh my God. I mean, that's what it is. Well, here's the key with imposter syndrome. Studies show everybody suffers from it at some point or another. And women more than men, and people of color and women of color the most. So what does that tell you? It's not personal. It's in the air. If everybody's suffering from it, it's in the air. I think it's because we live in a world that's so judgmental. So to me, it's like television. Television's everywhere. Television looks real, sounds real. It can even feel real, right? You get scared, you get nervous, you get this voice, same thing. Looks real, sounds real, feels real. It's not real. It's not real. So try to work through that. That's what I do. I try to tell myself it's not real. And then if that doesn't work, I feel it only when people offer me jobs, right? I step into my first executive job. I walk into my first boardroom, right? Whatever that is, that's when you feel it. Well, listen, you wouldn't be there if people didn't think you belonged. They wouldn't have invited you. So even if you don't believe in yourself, believe in them, right? Believing in you. And worst case,
I like that, yeah.
Yeah. And in worst case, take it. Act like you are comfortable. Act like you are confident. Act like you know what you are doing until you do. Because eventually you will. You always do. You always ultimately figure it out.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, a lot of executives I've interviewed for my book, reading for the podcast, have told me that they've all gone through some point of imposter syndrome, and many of them still get it when they need to make a big decision. They need to invest money into a big project. The first thing is like, do you really know what you're doing here? Like, should you be doing this? Should you pass this off to somebody else? So, but I think you're right. A lot of people experience it, and it's not something that like you crush and then it's gone forever. Like it comes up frequently, and the important thing is to recognize it and have those mechanisms for what you tell yourself, which it sounds like you have those tools, which are great. So the next part of the book, you talk about strategize for success. And one of the things we already looked at a little bit, which is preparing for the opportunity to appear. I don't know, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that, or did we cover that one pretty well?
We covered that one pretty well, but let me just summarize it though real quick, which is a lot of people, will set goals, say, oh, here's what I want to do one day. And some people will actually put plans in place to try to achieve that. Very few people make decisions every day though, consistent with their plans. And that's really what preparing for success is about. And that's where the real power lies.
So literally every day, like doing things on a regular basis that can...
It's like when you have decisions. I mean, here's a simple example, right? So my husband and I, we're now engaged and we're planning to get married. And I want to have kids sooner versus later, right? He does too, so great. Well, before we even get married, we start saving for childcare. Okay, because childcare is going to be this huge thing. We know it's going to be this huge thing. So when we get married, do we immediately go get new cars like most people do? Do we immediately go get finally I get a nice apartment, or I get to go buy a house, or I get to... Well, what happens for most people is they aren't thinking about the future. What they're thinking about is, finally, right, I can do this. And next thing you know, more than half their income is tied up in fixed expenses, which means when the child does come along and suddenly you need a chunk of change, you can't afford it. I can't afford childcare. Well, you know what? You could have if you planned earlier, right? So that you had that flexibility. We bought used cars, okay? We did all these things that, around us, people are kind of like, okay, what are you doing? No, but I had childcare. I had real good childcare.
Yeah.
So that's why I make decisions.
Yeah, it's a great example. Okay, so in Strategize for Success, some of the other things that I thought were really important were fostering self-determination, because, especially now in this crazy world that we're all a part of, I feel like a lot of people really, really need to have that self-determination. A lot of people are going through a process of reinvention, changing careers, changing industries, upending their entire lives. So can you talk a little bit about that self-determination and how do you foster that?
Sure. So self-determination is basically means you've got a sense of autonomy, right? That you believe that you're in control of yourself. You've got a sense of, I'll use the word confidence, right? And that you have confidence that you can go get things. But the key part that I was missing as I was growing up was relatedness. And it really takes all of those things. And relatedness means you feel like you belong. And I always felt like the outsider in so many situations. So fostering that means figuring out how do you create an environment in which you feel you belong. So for me, it ended up joining groups or starting groups. That's how I kind of built my relatedness, whether it was early on things like ITSMF, IT Senior Management Forum, when I was a professional, Watermark or C200, which are women's organizations. I started a gourmet dinner club when I moved to Silicon Valley, which became my people, right? So it's really important that we have environments in which we feel we really belong and that others care about us.
There were two things that I was kind of torn with. You can let me know which one you think is more, or which one you prefer to talk about. One was in build your reputation, and the other one was take a stand. So if you had to pick which one of those we should talk about next, which one would you go with?
Oh man, build a reputation or take a stand. Those are tough.
I know. I guess I was stuck with the same two.
Well, let's talk about build a reputation.
Okay.
So on build a reputation, it's funny. Some people will come to me in their middle career or whatever and say, I'm trying to build my reputation, or create my brand and do the whole bit. And what they're missing is they already have one. You already have one. Everything you do and communicate and say and whatever is actually creating your brand. It's creating your reputation. And this is something I learned kind of by accident in college. And I'm just thankful I learned it in terms of so early. Yeah. So because you want to realize that is the case. You don't suddenly one day say, okay, I want a reputation of being blah, 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 and think it's just going to happen, because it's not. How you act and what you do every day is what builds that reputation. It's how you impact others. because that's what they remember.
So it's not, yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people, at least when I think of building a reputation, a lot of people think of, yeah, creating something, my online persona, but very few people, like you said, understand that they already have one. And we don't think about it. But I remember there used to be a lot of conversations around personal branding, like way back in the day, a couple of years ago. And I think it's becoming even more prevalent now. So your brand, I suppose, or your reputation manifests in how you act, how you talk to people, how you treat others, like all the interactions, because people will remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. And trust me, if you create this persona, this personal brand that is different from who you actually are, what that does is it creates an environment in which people will not trust you. They won't trust you because who's showing up, right? Yeah. Here's your brand, but when you meet them in person, they're like, really? Okay, so that doesn't work. It's incongruent. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, but you'll hear just the opposite. You know what? I met so-and-so and they're just like they see, right? And people, it's a genuine like awe. You go so much further by having it be exactly the same than it actually being different. And by the way, you can't just say, well, here's the brand I'm going to start acting like, because it's impossible to act like something you're not 100% of the time forever.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a lot of leaders struggle with this too, because they try to create like these different personas, like they're one person at home, they're another person at work. And then it's like, well, who am I? So, just being you, I think, is an important aspect there.
It really is. Yeah. It really is. It's being authentic.
Yeah, the authenticity, exactly. So the next section, living the plan. One of the topics that you have in there is forget about work-life balance, which I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, how can we forget about work-life balance? Yeah. So why should we be forgetting about it, first of all? And I think you wrote all this right before COVID and everything happened, right?
I did.
So has that changed at all after COVID?
No, if anything, it just reinforces it. Let me explain why. The whole term work-life balance, I really cannot stand the term. And the reason I can't stand the term is because what is a balance? A balance is a static structure, right? That's even on both sides at all times. Is your life static? No, life's like this. And I'm going to be judged on whether or not I can hold my life in balance static, no matter all the swerves and turns and twists. That's crazy. I think the term was created to make us all feel perpetually guilty. All right? No. I wear all these hats, but they're all on the same head. I take my professional priorities, my personal priorities, I put them together and I ruthlessly prioritize. And I get done what needs to get done. And what that means is some things won't get done or somebody else has to do them. So in times of COVID, especially, please, like I said, nothing is the same right now that it's been. You have dogs coming in, you're trying to do stuff, you've got kids you have to feed, all these things that you can't use a lot of the resources that you used to use to help you. And you're not going to integrate. I believe in integrating life, which means you do what you need to do when you need to do it.
Yeah.
And that's most important now.
Yeah, I like the approach of an integrated life, work-life integration. And yeah, I mean, I live in the Bay Area, so we're on lockdown, getting no schools, no playgrounds, no zoos. I got kids downstairs and dogs. My wife's working from home. Yeah, it's chaos. So
yeah, totally chaos.
There's very little balance that's going on in the Morgan house right now. I can tell you that.
No, and it's true for everybody. So if you're sitting there saying, "Oh God, I'm failing because I'm not balanced," that's terrible.
Yep.
No, don't worry about being balanced right now. Just worry about get done what has to get done on all fronts.
Yep. Next one you have in there is embrace your limits, which I thought was another really, really important one. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So embracing your limits is just realizing, what you're good at, what you're not, where you can push. One of the things that I personally believe is that it's important to strengthen your strengths. It's funny, people coming up in professionally, right? I just remember people are always like, strengths and weaknesses. You got to strengthen your weaknesses and get it.
Yeah.
But think about that. Does that really make sense? What you tend to be known for are your strengths, right? You're known for your strengths. And if I took an hour and worked on a weakness, I might budget a little bit. But if I took an hour and worked on improving something I'm already strong at, I'd probably move it a lot farther. Yep. So why would I waste the time trying to just get a weakness to be a little less weak versus making my strength, which I'm actually known for, which will actually have a bigger impact on what my future opportunities might be, all those kinds of things. I got to strengthen my strengths. Now, weaknesses cannot be detractors, right? If it's a detractor, you've got to get it to par. But all I'm saying is once that's the case, there's no reason to spend a lot of time strengthening weaknesses. That's why you have teams, right? You pull people together to bring different strengths and different capabilities. You don't have to be strong at everything.
And I suppose part of that is surrounding yourself by people who are good at the things that you're not good at. I think leaders oftentimes, they struggle with that, right? Because as a leader, you oftentimes want to be the smartest in the room. You want to be the best in the room. And you got to have a little bit of courage and to, not be insecure, to surround yourself by people who are maybe more talented or capable than you in certain areas.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you say that, Jacob, because honestly, I believe the main role and responsibility of a leader is to build more leaders.
No.
All right. So the best feedback that you can get is when somebody that you've hired that's worked for you goes on to do something greater, right, than you've done. That's fantastic. You have excelled at the whole thing of building more leaders. So the best position in the world is when you have a team where everybody is significantly better than you are.
Yeah. Don't be upset if somebody gets promoted that you were leading. You should be happy for them and not like, that's mine.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like that approach. Okay. So embracing your limits. And I think a part of that is also probably having a lot of self-awareness, right? Understanding your strengths and weaknesses and how other people perceive you as well. The next part of that is manage your own career, which I also think, especially now, is really, really good advice. So can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, it amazes me how many people don't do that. You would never spend thousands of dollars, Jacob, for an airline ticket. Pack your bag, put your dogs in the kennel, right? Close your mail, do all kind of stuff, go to the airport, get in the airplane, put the seatbelt on and look at the pilot and say, so where are we going anyway?
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? But we do that every day with our careers. We spend tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on education and training and conferences, all this development stuff, right? We show up at work, we do our work, and then we wait for somebody to tap us and say, oh, we think you should do this now. Oh, we think you should. No, it's nuts. You need to own your career. Decide what it is you're trying to do so that you know what kind of skills you want to be building, what kind of opportunities you want to go after. Take help to be able to do those things. But you own your career, not your boss, not your company, not your mentor, not your spouse. You own your career.
So how do you actually put that into practice? So for a lot of people who have regular full-time jobs who are thinking, oh yeah, I want to do what she's recommending. Does that mean finding the training and development programs your company offers and, take advantage of those, grabbing coffee with people who could maybe teach you things, really just being that active driver of yourself?
Yeah, it's being proactive, right? It really is just being proactive. Here's a simple example early in my career, because you said we have people on this listening probably early as well as late, early in my career. So I show up at IBM and I've got this goal in the back of my mind. I want to be CEO one day. So I'm watching the executives and you know what? All of the executives that I'm seeing are really good speakers. They're able to communicate. It seems like with no notice, if they need to, they can get up and present and do all those things. I wasn't very good at it. Right? And I'm thinking, oh my God, if I don't figure out how to become a better speaker, I'm not even going to make an executive. Forget becoming a CEO, right? So I spent time and I actually worked on it and I got trained and I did all of that. And now I'm a pretty good speaker. So when I say own your career and be intentional about it, it's looking to say, what skills do I need? What experiences should I get? And then go get them, go do them so that you are moving forward. Don't wait until later when somebody says, oh, well, the reason you're not getting promoted is because you can't do X. That's a little late. You can be proactive about this.
Yeah, I always like to tell people, nobody's going to look out for you but you. So you got to take more accountability over your personal and professional development. But I think part of the good news is that we have so many cool tools and resources at our disposal now. I mean, you can go into YouTube and learn pretty much anything that you want for free.
So true.
You just got to spend the time to like go onto YouTube and type in how to be a better speaker, how to lead, how to deal with conflict. You'd be surprised the things that you can find if you're willing to invest a little bit of time and effort and energy into doing it. And I think you actually have to now. Like, if you don't have that mentality, I think a lot of people are going to struggle or get left behind in their careers.
So true.
Okay, so getting back to, I think the next one is swerve, which is also good and also very applicable now because a lot of people, especially now as a result of COVID, are going through lots of swerves. I've talked to several executives of companies who are like, yeah, I'm taking a complete pivot. Like, I'm not doing anything in corporate America. I talked to one lady. She used to be a corporate attorney, and now she's doing a mobile dog grooming service. So people are just complete swerves all over the place. And one of the things that you talk about is move around the roadblocks that you can't move. And, don't smack your head into a wall nonstop. Go around it. So can you talk a little bit about that one?
Absolutely. So, we're going to come, you can create plans, right? I set goals, make plans, whatever, but plans don't always go as you expected. And that's okay. But when you hit a challenge, IBM, right? I said, okay, I don't think I'm really going to get the chance to become CEO. I could have stayed, right? I could have stayed and I probably would have done fine. I wouldn't be CEO, right? But why would I stay then? So that became this roadblock. So I had to leave, right? I moved around it. Sometimes you have bosses that are not supportive, right? And you've got to figure out what you do in terms of get around it. Don't just sit there and say, okay, I'm stuck, because you're not stuck. You always have power to go over, under, around. And by the way, if you don't think you have enough power yourself, get help. Get help. There are people out there. There are mentors or supporters, right? There are allies. There are all kinds of people. So asking for help is a sign of strength. It is not a sign of weakness, because that means you know yourself enough to know when you need the help. One of the things I like to say, Jacob, is the only difference between a roadblock and a stepping stone is how high you lift your leg.
I like that quote. That's a good one.
So don't let anything stop you. You come up against something, just figure it out. Around, over, under, or get a whole bunch of people and just go through it.
Do you have any stories from your experience or career of how you were presented with a roadblock and you had to go around or under?
The answer is yes, of course. So let me share one where, here it is. I'm ready to be promoted. I mean, I've done what they've asked me to do. I have high marks, right? The whole bit, ratings, etc. I should be ready. And I'm talking to my boss. And he goes, yep, you're ready. There just aren't opportunities. There just aren't opportunities. All right. Does that make any sense? There aren't opportunities. So after, call it 6-7 months, of this, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. So I finally finagled my way to get a skip level conversation, right, with his boss. And I have the conversation and I say, by the way, I am interested in being promoted. I want to do such and such and such and such. And he says, yes, I know. He goes, but there just aren't opportunities like that in this area. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, we know you don't want to move. And I said, that's not true. I said, I'm very willing to move. Where did that come from? Oh, we just thought you wouldn't want to move. All right, so here's the deal. At the time, married, husband, he's working too, I have kids. An assumption was being made, right? My roadblock was this assumption that I never heard until I finally went around to actually here's the conversation. So if things just aren't working out right, you've got to go after it, with different angles. I once had a situation where, here's one. I had a peer who was constantly trying to undermine me. One of these people that's like always doing the digs, right?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. Right. A lot of people have had that. All right. So how do you deal with that? First you try to have a conversation to say, hey, is there something I'm missing? Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. This is all good. And then you hear feedback, right? It's like, what the world? So here's what I learned to do that may also work for you. What I learned to do was I started complimenting this person only in public. I compliment this person in public whenever I had the opportunity.
Hmm.
Oh, look what so-and-so did, right? And oh, it was so-and-so, right? Blah, blah. I did that over and over again. People are like, wait a minute, why would you do that? She's digging you. Here's why. Because then when she started to poke at me, say bad things about me, whatever, it was incongruous. People were like, why is she saying that? Shellye says nothing but positive things about her. All of a sudden it became her problem and not mine. So there are different ways that you can have roadblocks.
Yeah, those are actually really great stories. I'm glad I asked you. Yeah, those are fantastic. So a couple others that I really liked in this category. Well, I had 3 more that I picked out. Maybe let me pick 1 or 2. One is never say die.
Yes.
I really liked. So what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so never say die basically means do not give up. We are going to figure out how to get it done, whatever it is, right? Never say die. And where this came from is when I was CEO of MetricStream, we had fought and scraped our ways and we're finally market leaders and feeling really good. Revenues finally flowing, customers are calling, and then second half of 2008 hits and bam, right up against a wall. Yeah. Well, we had been investing with the idea that we were going to raise money in 2009. So suddenly we are on fumes, right? And we have to have the conversation as a team to say, are we going to fight or are we going to fold? Because we're in bad shape, and we were. And what it meant was we'd take pay cuts, which is not good, but we decided to fight. And we added the never say die literally to our company values. That was never say die, because what we agreed is never say die. We are going to figure out how to make this company successful despite all of our issues. And we did. So never say die is about resilience. It's about just because something gets hard, don't stop. Life is hard. People don't talk about that, but life is hard for everybody. So just because it's hard for you, don't think you can't do it.
So what did you do? I mean, I know there's probably a whole conversation around this, but as far as being resilient and not dying, I mean, what did you guys have to do to make sure that the company continued to grow and thrive?
Focus. I can't tell you how important focus is when you are in the middle of a storm, right? And hard times. Everyone has to be pulling on the oar in the same direction when you don't have a lot of resource and you can't afford to waste anything. So it's all about focus. Focus, a lot of communications, and letting people know what's important. It's like, okay, we need to win this customer. Literally, at one point it came down to, if we don't close this customer and get them to sign and pay us up front, right, we're not making payroll. I mean, literally. Oh yeah, when I say we were in tough, this was not an easy thing, right, to say, yes, we're going to fight. So it was like the whole company, everybody is now in sales, everybody. So let's figure out what we can do, right, to make sure that this happens. We got the deal, we made payroll, right, and we survived in terms of stuff. But it was situation after situation, that came up, and it was just getting everybody focused on what is actually important now. And when you do that, all the extra stuff falls away. That little infighting, I mean, nobody's time for it. So focus is the most important thing that you can bring, and vision, because it's hard and people aren't sure if you're going to make it. And so people might want to jump ship. So you've got to make sure that you are inspiring people every day, that they see you right in it and on it and want to be a part of what will come.
Part of, I think, what goes really well with this, and the other theme was around keep learning. And this has been a sort of a consistent theme with a lot of the different areas, learning new things, building your reputation, creating your own career. Like, a lot of this has to deal with this idea of keep learning. And I feel like so many people assume that by the time they graduate college, they can just take whatever they learned and apply it and they're good. Or if they need to learn something new, their company will teach them something. But we need to have a lot more accountability to learn ourselves. So can you talk about the importance of keep learning? And does a story or experience come to mind for you where you had to learn something yourself?
So yes, keep learning. One of the phrases I use a lot is doing my homework. I say the phrase doing my homework. And doing my homework it's even around goal setting, right? You set a goal. Okay, I want to achieve this. Well, what has to be true to achieve it? Well, I don't know. So I've got to do the homework. I've got to go learn. I've got to go find out. I've got to understand, right, et cetera, so I can figure out how I then go get it. So yes, I'm a big believer in doing homework. And, being prepared means you need to actually learn and be prepared before you show up. If you're going into a situation, I don't care if it's a meeting, if it's an event, if it's a conference, whatever, on a topic or on an issue in which you don't know all that you think you should know, don't expect that the meeting is going to educate you. A lot of people do. Well, I'm going to go to this meeting. No. If you're learning in the meeting, then odds are you're not able to actually contribute. You aren't able to move that ball forward. And that's what you need to be able to do and demonstrate in order to be considered for the next thing. So do your work first. Be prepared. That's all part of, we talked about luck, improving your odds to be lucky. That's part of it, is doing your homework. So that learning piece is really important because, listen, the world is changing too fast. Yeah. Technology is changing too fast. Everything is changing too fast. So if you aren't keeping up with where things are, then you're not going to be able to contribute to the level that others will, and you won't be able to move forward.
So what did you do when you were CEO, or even now? Do you still focus on learning, and what do you do? Like, how do you learn now?
It's interesting. So here's a couple ways in terms of learning. One, I try to read. I'm an economist person. I like The Economist. And I pick things that are interesting that I don't sometimes even know much about. And those things I will read, right? Or I will do. I look to see what's coming, what people are talking about, and then try to get educated on, all right, how do I use this? Or how does this work, right? Et cetera. It's an ongoing effort. And trust me, it's hard because there is so much coming at me. I don't know how people that aren't kind of in that mode are actually keeping up with what's happening.
Yeah, you kind of, you need to be. I mean, as some of the CEOs I've interviewed have told me, things are never going to be as slow as they are now. And that's kind of the mentality that you need to have. Like the rapid pace of change is just, it's the new normal. It's the new reality you need to be a part of.
Exactly. It is just accelerating. Yep. We're on an acceleration path. Exactly. It's not linear.
So the last section of the book is about improving the odds. And you had a couple of really good sections in there, starting off with finding your mentors. And so for people listening to this who are in that process of like, I want to have a mentor, how do I go about finding that person, building that relationship? Do you have any advice or suggestions?
So I do. And let me just tell a quick story, if that's okay, Jacob, around this. So here I am about 6 years into my career, and IBM decides that they want their high potential people to have mentors. More than that, they're asking us who we want our mentors to be. So I pick a gentleman by the name of Roland Harris. He's a couple levels above me. I think he likes me, right? I'm like, okay, Roland. So I put his name down. Well, several days go by and Roland calls me up. Shellye. Hi, Roland. Shellye, you put my name down to be your mentor. I'm like, well, yeah, Roland, I thought you liked me. He says, Shellye, you've got me. Go get somebody else. And I'm like, what? So I learned two things in that. One, I didn't even know Roland considered himself a mentor, right? So a mentor-mentee relationship doesn't have to be formal.
Yeah.
All right, that's one. Two, I can have as many mentors as I want because he just told me I can go get more. And literally the way I've approached my career after that is I didn't bother with these formal relationships because I found if I asked somebody to be a mentor, you'd get this wide-eyed, literally backing up.
It's intimidating, yeah.
How do I get out of this, right?
Deer in headlights.
Personal, right? It's not personal. It's not they don't like you. They don't have time. And they don't even know if it's going to be worth it. They don't even know if you're a good mentee, right? All those things. So I just didn't ask people. I just started treating them like mentors. So I just adopted them. And as a result, I had a ton of mentors over my career. And I highly encourage people to definitely go out there and adopt mentors. And I tell you in the book how to do it.
So a mentor, and I think you're right, a lot of people assume that having a mentor needs to be a formal relationship. Like, hey, Shellye, will you be my mentor? But the reality is you can just have somebody, I mean, you don't even need to call it that. You can just have somebody who you go to talk to, somebody who's providing you guidance, somebody who, you don't need to have the official name behind it.
No.
It sort of reminds me when, when you're younger in your teens and everybody says, are we boyfriend, girlfriend? Are we official?
Right, exactly.
And so and it's a very committal thing. It's like, oh, I don't know. Like, I'm happy with where things are. I don't know if you want to call it that and make it all weird.
Yeah.
So you have people there that you can talk to.
Yeah, it's true. Because at the end of the day, a mentor-mentee relationship is a relationship.
Yeah.
That's really what you're just trying to create. You're just trying to create relationships.
Yep.
And so that's what to focus on.
Okay, perfect. So the next one that I wanted to go over in this section, take risks. This is a big one because a lot of people are worried, what kind of risks do I take? Do I take a big risk, a little risk? What happens if the risk I take fails and I fall flat on my face? What do I do? So can you share how do you think about taking risks and any stories about risks that you took that went well or didn't go well?
Oh gosh. So yeah, I've been taking risks all the way through. The way I think about risk is something comes up, right? Typically there's an opportunity, because risk and opportunity are two sides of the same coin, right? You can't get opportunity if you're not taking risks. But I ask myself, okay, so what's the likely outcome if I do this? What's the upside? And then I ask myself, what's the worst that can happen? And can I live with it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I ask myself what's the worst that can happen is many times we don't do things because we're afraid, but we don't spend any time actually understanding what are we actually afraid of. And if we actually spend the time to parse what we're afraid of, we might figure out that it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Which is why can I live with it, right? Is it gonna damage my health forever? Is it gonna put my family out on the street? Right? Is it going to, there are things that no, I cannot live with. But you know what? There's a lot between that I can live with. So identify what is it you're afraid of, and then you might actually be able to deal with it. And if I can live with it, then I'll take the risk. So when I think about risks, man, leaving IBM was a huge risk. I had my whole network at IBM. I had a path. I was on a high potential. I was all these things, right? And I'm leaving IBM, and suddenly I end up, boom, in a brand new place. No reputation, right? People don't know me. I have to prove everything all over again. It's a huge risk when you do those things. Taking the job at Zaplet, which was a very broken company, losing money, that most investors thought it was already out of business. Oh my God, you can't get a risk bigger than that. Yeah. But I took that risk too. So yes, the good news is that panned out. Leaving IBM, the very first job, didn't really. I left IBM to become president of Blockbuster.com. This is back in the late 90s when Blockbuster was a behemoth. They were everywhere. And they wanted to start their .com. So it was standing up a brand new division. And I thought this was the perfect place to come to kind of get experience, seat at the table, build something before I went off and actually built kind of my own thing, if you will. And so looking at this, I thought, great, I'll go do that. Internet, right? All that stuff. That'll be terrific. Well, I get there, do a bunch of things, but in 6 months, 7 months, it becomes pretty clear when Blockbuster passes on the opportunity to do a deal with Netflix that, you know what? They don't have the vision.
Were you part of those conversations? Because I was asking Nigel about that as well. So do you remember, because I also interviewed Mark Randolph, who's the first CEO of Netflix, and he was telling me the story of how they chartered a plane and they went over to Blockbuster and they were so excited to pitch this idea and they thought it was going to happen, and that the executives of Blockbuster were like, nope, we're just going to do this ourselves. And that Mark and his team were just like frozen, they were just shocked. So were you a part of those conversations at all?
Here's the meeting. I helped broker the meeting. I got a chance to meet Reed as part of, they're doing Netflix, I'm doing Blockbuster.com. We meet at conferences, at things or whatever. And then it's a matter of, setting up the meeting and having things come. But this was really a decision, by the CEO that, nope, not doing it. In hindsight, you sit there and say, oh man, what an idiot, right? Well, it's not so much. This happens all the time. Blockbuster at the time was printing money. And here's a company that doesn't have much to show for it, has some technology, right? And so so he's thinking, okay, if this turns into something, I'll just buy it because I've got all this money and the whole bit. But the biggest challenge I saw was they just didn't see the forethought, right? Didn't have the forethought for where these things are going.
Yeah. Oh, makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's such a fascinating story, and to talk to you and Nigel and Mark Randolph and get everyone's perspectives and insights. It's really really interesting. Like, because everybody's very smart. I mean, everybody who's a part of those discussions is a very smart, capable, talented person, and somehow these things happen. You know, sometimes it's just hard to explain.
Yep.
We only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to just ask you a couple fun, rapid-fire questions about yourself. Starting off with, what do you think was the biggest business mistake you ever made? Or failure, greatest business failure?
Oh my gosh. The greatest failure was, the greatest failure for me, I would still put Blockbuster, and I know that's wrong a decision, but because, I mean, went to Blockbuster, ended up spending a year and a day there, learned some things for sure, but I didn't move the ball like I wanted to move the ball. You know, I was planning to do that and really be able to create something significant, and I wasn't able to do it.
What one moment most impacted or influenced your approach to leadership? Like, is there a specific story or experience, something that happened that really made you reevaluate how you think about yourself as a leader?
You know, honestly, I've been a leader earlier. I talked about clubs and organizations that I was involved in, etc. I would say the earliest experience would actually be one with believe it or not, was my mother. Because my mother, I remember mom saying to me, it's important to understand what makes people tick if you really want to be able to lead people. And what she meant by that is you have to understand what motivates people.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, that's one of the key lessons all the way through, for sure, is okay. In order to understand what makes people tick, you actually have to understand people. You've actually got to spend time. You've got to be caring. You've got to, I mean, there's so many things that get layered on to that very simple concept.
Here's a great question that somebody asked. What risk would she take today that she wished she would have taken much earlier? It's a great one. I like that question.
Oh, yeah, it is a good question. You know, it's interesting. I'll caveat it to say, I believe that one thing leads to another. And so I'm reticent to go back and change anything because I'm happy with how things ended up, right? I mean, so you have that. But if there's one risk that I would have taken earlier, it probably would have been getting to Silicon Valley earlier.
Yeah.
I got to Silicon Valley in when was it? 2000? Yeah, 2000, 2001, right in there. And it would have been good to have been there before.
What are you most proud of?
Gosh, I am most proud of my kids.
I like it. What is a resource? It could be a book, a website, anything, but what is an important resource, besides your book, of course, an important resource that you think leaders need to be aware of that can help make them better?
Oh, wow. One resource to help make people better leaders.
Yeah, it could be a book, article.
Yeah, $1 trillion Coach.
$1 trillion, is that a book?
It's a book. It's a book about Bill Campbell's team leadership style.
Oh, I remember that. I think I have it on my Kindle, actually. I think I read that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bill Campbell was a coach to Steve Jobs, to Larry and Sergey at Google, he is the reason for a number of companies that have become, its reason it's called $1 trillion Coach, is the things that he's influenced and impacted have created trillions of dollars of market value.
Yeah, there it is. So people don't think I'm lying. There it is on my Kindle.
There you go.
$1 trillion Coach for people who are watching. Yeah, I remember reading this. This was a very, very fascinating read. Okay, yeah, that's a great book. I highly recommend too. And maybe last question for you. If you were doing a different career, what do you think you would have ended up doing and why?
Whoa.
So if you were 16 and you, instead of picking CEO, was there another potential for you?
Actually, it's funny. When I was younger than that, I wanted to be a pilot. But I had really bad eyesight, and it was before a LASIK. And so I didn't qualify.
All right. Oh, pilot. That would have been fascinating. I'm always fascinated with pilots. Well, Shellye, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me. Where can people go to learn more about you, grab your book, anything that you want to mention for people to check in?
Well, thank you. Shellye.com, SHELLYE.com. You can learn more about the book. You can learn a bit more for sure about me and things, and you can sign up for newsletters to get inspiration and what have you. So Shellye.com, and follow me on social media. I'm very active. I try to share inspiration and wisdom and impact.
Can I just say that it's awesome that you were able to get that URL?
Thank you.
If I was able to get if I could get jacob.com, I would be thrilled. But sadly, I don't think that's going to happen.
Planning.
Well, again,
it's all about
bad 16-year-old Jacob. If only I would have known about it back then. Well, thanks again for taking time out of your day to speak with me, and thanks everyone for listening. Again, my guest has been Shellye Archambeau. Make sure to check out our book. It's called Unapologetically Ambitious. Take risks, break barriers, and create success on your own terms. Available wherever books are sold. I had a chance to read it. It is awesome, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of value out of it as well. So, Shellye, thank you again.
Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. We'll see everybody next time.